tea is just a simple infusion of plant material and hot water, yet somehow it's a lot more than that. It can be culture, conversation, or comfort. You can spend your money on tea and tea paraphernalia if you want, but if you don't, you can also get yourself a flavorful cuppa for the price of an afternoon stroll. There are wild plants everywhere that can offer something to brew. Now for folks looking to cut down on their caffeine consumption and the amount of garbage they generate with their daily cup, or who just want to enjoy the I can't find it in any store flavor of their own land, wild teas are a fascinating world to explore. The variety of plants that can be steeped and brewed into a pleasant and healing drink seems nearly endless. So I hope I can provide you with some easy to identify and easy to find so-called weeds that I hope can live happily on your tea shelf. This video is meant as a launching point for exploring all these plants, and it won't give you a complete means of identification if you've never foraged for them before. If you find an intriguing new species on this list, take its scientific name along with you and do more research to be sure you can correctly identify it in the field before you ever drink it. Furthermore, this is a very incomplete list, and I hope that statement comes as exciting news. The plants available to throw in a teapot are incredibly diverse. So here's 12 wild tea leaves to look for. These 12 are the plants that I most commonly reach for, but that's only because they're easy to find in the Ozarks. There are guaranteed to be dozens more to discover in your own area. Red clover, flower, and leaf, Trifolium pratense. I confess red clover is one of my favorite wild teas, so that's why I had to make sure it started this list. The bright pinky red blossoms and surrounding leaves below it can be harvested by the handful, used fresh or dried, and preserved to make a sweetly sustaining beverage that tastes like early summer captured in a cup. White clover, Trifolium repens, can also be used, but I find that its white blossoms aren't quite as sweet. Bear in mind that red clover is rich in minerals, which means it can be contaminated with heavy metals if you harvest it from a polluted site. Check out our earlier video on how to forage safely if you're interested, and be sure to always harvest any wild tea from a non-toxic area that hasn't been sprayed with chemicals. Elderflower, Sambucus nigra. I would add elderflowers to a cup of tea if only for their poetic presence starring the top of a steaming cup, but they have a delightful flavor as well. Honey, sweet, and floral, they make a tea that is delicate in color and flavor. Both hot and cold infusions work well. I particularly like making sun tea out of lemon balm and elderflower. Now when harvesting elderflower, I recommend shaking blossoms free from the umbels rather than picking the whole thing. Granted, you're going to get a few ants and spiders along for the ride, but you'll end up harvesting the pollinated flower petals only, leaving the fertilized embryonic berries for a second harvest a few months later. Monarda leaves and flower, the various Monarda species. There are several species of tasty plants in this genus, and all of them are excellent for tea, either fresh or dried. In the early spring, spotted bee balm, Monarda punctata, Oswego tea, Monarda didyma, eastern bee balm, Monarda bradburyiana, wild bergamot, Monarda fistulosa, and all of their various cousins send up their aromatic paired leaves. A few weeks later, they'll throw out their beautiful, messy daisy-like heads to the frenzied delight of bumblebees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. Both the leaves and flowers are excellent for tea, but I always recommend harvesting only 1/3 of any given plant. These perennials are food for lots of other creatures, and the sight of them in a field is worth prolonging. In the mug, Monarda relatives are aromatic and warming with spicy notes of oregano and mint. Sassafras leaf and root, Sassafras albidum. Now sassafras has gotten a bad rap as a dangerous plant due to some FDA studies on the carcinogenic properties of saffrol, a compound found in the roots. Even though the studies were done with concentrated amounts of pure saffrol fed to rats, rather than the complex brew created by brewing the whole roots into tea, the studies inspired fear. Folks heard sassafras causes cancer, rather than artificial preparations of pure saffrol administered over a long period of time can hurt a rat, and have feared it ever since. Now seeing that neither you nor I are a rat, and the traditional preparation of whole sassafras root is not a concentrated pure isolate of saffrol, I suggest that these cautions have been way overblown. I instead encourage you to enjoy sassafras tea anytime you'd like, just as indigenous people, pioneers, mountain folk have for hundreds of years. I have well-known foragers who back me up on that assertion, by the way, so you don't have to just take my word for it. Now this potently aromatic tree offers 3 different options for your brew and pleasure. First, there's the spring leaf buds and twigs. Harvest these lightly, as they are meant to become leaves in the later spring, and plucking too many will harm the tree. Second, there's the leaves themselves. Sassafras leaves do lack saffrol, so if you're still worried about those studies despite my efforts, you can harvest them without worry. You can even snack on the newly emerged tender leaves if you want. They taste unexpectedly like a certain loopy, fruity breakfast cereal. Finally, tea can be brewed from the sassafras roots. You'll have to kill a tree in order to gain this tea ingredient, so be sure to choose your victim thoughtfully. Usually you can find a stand of several small trees clumped together and then thin one out. After scrubbing the sweet, spicy roots, chop them in chunks and boil them in water for several minutes to extract a rich, root beer-like tea. The traditional preparation includes boiling, not steeping the roots. This gives the best flavor, and there's wisdom in it. Saffrol isn't heat stable. Blackberry leaf. Rubus species. Now in the late spring, blackberries and their cousin brambleberries put out special treats of not so prickly leaves. When the deeply fluted new leaves of the various members of the rubus genus first emerge, they are downy soft and can be harvested with a bare hand. These fresh leaves make a wonderful tea, and it can be harvested with abandon. Whatever you pluck, guaranteed will regrow quickly. Now through the rest of the year, the leaves are still good for picking as long as they're green, but bear in mind that fully developed leaves are not as tender as they were in the spring and are instead equipped with those distinctive thorns and prickles of their own. The prickles don't matter once they're in the kettle, of course, but getting them to the kettle in the first place will be a bit of a stabby undertaking. Blackberry leaf tea is bracing, pleasantly bitter, and has a faint overtone of berry. I enjoy this tea blended with red clover in the dead of winter. It makes the cold seem a bit further away. New Jersey tea. Ceanthus americanus. With tea in the name, it's easy to guess that this perennial shrub is no stranger to the teapot. These drought-tolerant plants played an important role in the Revolutionary War when they were discovered to be similar in taste and character to the imported, overtaxed teas. True to its name, the leaves of the shrub make a truly excellent tea. Picked fresh and brewed, I find them similar in character to a grassy green tea. Dried and cured, they can yield a black tea flavor. Mulberry leaf, Morris species. Mulberries of both the native and Asian variety grow pretty much everywhere across the United States from coast to coast, offering free berries, and for those who know their secret, ample leaves to collect for tea. You can use them either fresh, dried, or powdered, and their taste is pleasantly vegetal with that hint of berry-like sweetness. The tea is so well liked that it's even sold commercially. Strawberry leaf, Fragaria vesca. Strawberries are a short-lived spring treasure, appearing like edible rubies and then disappearing just as quickly. But the leaves of these spreading plants are evergreen, offering you the chance to harvest tea nearly year-round. Strawberry leaves dry nicely, taking on a silvery hue due to the downy hairs on their undersides. When brewed, they produce a pleasant flavor that's reminiscent of their juicy fruit, yet undeniably green and leafy. It's good enough to brew as is, but it also blends really nicely with the other plants in this list. Wood sorrel leaf and flower from the various oxalis species. If you're a fan of lemon in your tea, try throwing a few leaves and flowers of wood sorrel in next time. These common yardweeds have a delightfully bright, sour flavor that fills that citrusy role with a locally foraged twist. I must confess that I always use these leaves fresh, so I can't confirm their viability as a dried tea. Even so, I imagine they're best as an addition, not a base. Self-heal flower and leaf, Prunella vulgaris. We've mentioned self-heal a while back in an earlier article about making your own healing salve. This generous healing plant is entirely edible, making it a surprising member of your tea shelf. Self-heal flowers and leaves don't have much aroma when they're fresh, but when dried and brewed into tea, they lend a special sort of maltiness that can make a flat tea taste a little bit more round. Dandelion flower, Taraxacum officinale. We have an entire earlier article on the various ways you can brew dandelions in a delightfully sunny tea. You'll have to check out the link to that in the description box below. But I would be remiss if I neglect to throw their bright, easy-to-find flowers into our good-for-tea lineup. American pennyroyal leaf, Hedioma pulgoides. If you're in the region where American pennyroyal flourishes, you've likely found it with your nose before your hands. The low-growing member of the mint family is small but mighty. We'll go into greater detail about foraging and drying the pungent and petite plant in our earlier video on foraging for wild mints. My favorite combination featuring pennyroyal isn't completely wild, but it is worth sharing. Combine 3 parts dried pennyroyal with 1 part fenugreek seed and 1 part fennel seed. When brewed, gently sweeten with a bit of honey and blend with milk. Now it may look a bit like dishwater, but the flavor more than compensates. It's one of my favorite goodnight drinks. Now let's talk about brewing wild tea. If you've only ever made tea with a tea bag, a handful of fresh or dried plant material might seem a bit, well, awkward. Thankfully, it's easy to translate that bouquet of foraged findings into a warm, sippable cup. First, gently rinse your plants, especially flowers, in a quick spritz of water. You'll often find a stowaway spider or ant, and that's not something anybody wants in their mug. Second, place the plants in a large pot. Cover with water and bring to a gentle simmer, except in the case of sassafras root where you want a roiling boil. Turn off the heat, cover, let sit for 4 minutes, and hurry, you're ready to go. Pour the resulting tea through a tea strainer or sieve into your favorite mug. Sweeten with honey if desired, sip, and relax. So that's my favorite assortment of wild tea plants, but there are hundreds more to explore, combine, and preserve. You should share your favorite findings and fixins in the comments below.